The story that you are about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts, featuring characters, events, or places that has played a role in shaping history. Please sit back and listen as I recite this narrative for you. Three years before Jack the Ripper struck London, another midnight murderer or murderers brutally attacked and murdered 8 women in their beds. In Austin, Texas, an individual who became known as the servant Girl Annihilator was responsible for the deaths of 8 people between late 1884 and Christmas Eve 1885. He was overshadowed in historical records because most of his victims were poor and African Americans. He has been called America's first serial killer, and his crimes remain unsolved to this day. Attacking victims in their beds and then dragging them outside to mutilate their bodies, the killer eluded police, private investigators, and mobs of civilians who took to the unpaved streets of newly settled Austin in anger and panic. The first killing took place on New Year's Eve 1884. An African American woman, Molly Smith, 25 years old, was found outside the 2-story home of her employer William Hall in West Pecan Street. She cooked and kept house for the Halls and lived in a room in the back with her common-law husband, Walter Spencer, who had also been attacked. He awoke in agony with a deep gash across his face to find Molly had gone. The wounds to Molly's face and head indicated that she had been killed with an axe. Her nightdress was torn to shreds, and from the way she had been left, it was clear that she had been raped. She had also been stabbed in the chest, abdomen, legs, and arms, creating such a large pool of blood that she appeared to almost be floating in it. On May 6, 1885, another African-American servant girl, Eliza Shelley, was murdered in the same bloodthirsty fashion. The newspapers immediately connected her murder with the slaughter of Molly Smith. Eliza Shelley had been attacked on the property of Dr. L.B. Johnson, a former state congressman who lived at the corner of Cypress and Jacinto Streets near the railroad track with his wife and niece. Hired as a cook the previous month, Shelley lived in a cabin behind the house with her 3 children. On the night of the attack, Mrs. Johnson had heard screams emanating from Eliza's cabin and sent her niece to find out what was happening. Seeing something was terribly wrong, she summoned Dr. Johnson, who went to investigate. He found Eliza Shelley lying on the floor dead. She had sustained numerous grievous head wounds. One gash that appeared to have been made by an axe nearly cleaved her head in 2, and there were puncture wounds made by a sharp-pointed instrument. This time, the killer had taken the murder weapons with him. The pillows were covered in blood, indicating that she had been asleep in bed when she was attacked. Then, she had been dragged to the floor and her nightdress pulled up. Her naked midriff was raised on a pile of blankets and her genitals exposed, so it was thought that she had been raped by her attacker. Her 8-year-old son said that a man had come into the cabin in the middle of the night. The boy had woken up, but the man pushed him into a corner and told him to be quiet. He had placed a blanket over him, and the child had passed out, possibly as the result of chloroform that had recently been stolen from a dentist's home in Austin. The boy had no recollection of what happened to his mother. His younger brothers, who slept in the same bed as their mother, knew nothing. On May 23, another African-American servant girl was attacked in the middle of the night in her cabin across the road from a beer garden. Her name was Irene Cross. This time, the attacker had used a knife, but the attack was just as vicious. Her arm had been practically severed from her body, and the perpetrator had stabbed her so viciously in the head that she appeared to have been scalped. A 4th attack took place on August 29 at the home of livery stable owner Valentine Weed on Cedar and San Jacinto Streets, a block south of where Eliza Shelley had been raped and murdered. Weed's servant, Rebecca Ramey, had been attacked while she slept and left unconscious, while her 12-year-old daughter Mary was dragged outside into an alley and brutally raped. Then she was stabbed through both ears with an iron rod and died sometime later. Rebecca survived but could remember little of the attack. Even though news of the killings filled the papers, the white middle classes felt they had nothing to fear. However, their servants insisted on keeping the windows closed in the sweltering heat of the summer. The following two victims were a pair, sweethearts Gracie Vance and Orange Washington. On September 28, 1885, they were found with their heads bludgeoned. Gracie's head had been turned to a pulp, and a bloody brick lay by her corpse. In her hand was a gold watch that did not belong to her, its chains wrapped around her arm. According to one source, a strange horse was found saddled in the stable, but neither the watch nor the horse led the authorities to the culprit. The circumstances of the last attack indicated it was possible that more than one assailant was at work. Up until this point, all the victims had been African Americans. But that was to change on Christmas Eve 1885. After attending a concert at the State Institution for the Blind, Moses Hancock had been dozing in a chair at his home on San Jacinto Boulevard, and when he woke, he found his wife Susan missing. She had been dragged from her bed. He found her lying dead in the backyard. Her head cleaved open with an axe, and a sharp, thin implement was sticking out of her brain. Blood was pouring from her ears and soaking into her hair. Amazingly, she was not dead, though she never regained consciousness. It was also plain that she had been raped. But unlike the other victims, Mrs. Hancock was Caucasian. The killer had not finished for the night. Within an hour, society beauty Eula Luli Phillips was dead. One of the loveliest women in Austin, she had dark curly hair, pale skin, doe eyes, and an exquisite figure that turned men's heads in the street. She lived with her husband and infant son in her father-in-law's house in one of the richest neighborhoods of Austin. But although she was married to the son of a prominent citizen, it seems that she also entertained other distinguished lovers. As before, she had been attacked at home in bed. Her husband Jimmy, who lay beside her, had also been assaulted. He was left unconscious with a huge gash on the back of his head. Their son Doe, who was also present, was uninjured. The bloody axe was left in the middle of the bedroom floor. A trail of blood led from the bedroom down to the stairs, out of the house, and into a nearby alley. There, Eula Phillips had been raped and her head smashed in. Her naked body had been left spread-eagled with her arms pinned under timber. The only clue was a bloody shoe print left on the porch. It was large and made by a man. Now that leading white citizens were being struck down, the newspapers went into overdrive. Some suggested, as the killer could come and go without being seen, he had supernatural powers. Police back then relied on dogs to track suspects, and a team of bloodhounds run the lengths of Austin's unpaved streets nightly, sniffing and howling. Private investigators were brought in by police who hoped they'd be able to catch something their officers couldn't, but their presence only whipped Austin into more of a panic. And then, the murders stopped. Though around 400 men were arrested in 1885 under suspicion of being the Annihilator, none were ever successfully tried. The list included Walter Spencer, the boyfriend of the first victim, acquitted after a 2-day trial. Two suspicious-looking white brothers found with blood on their clothes. Eula's husband, Jimmy Phillips, and Susan's husband, Moses Hancock. Phillips, the prosecutors claimed, was a copycat killer before the term existed, using the murders of Austin's black working class as an excuse to kill his unfaithful and beautiful wife. Initially sentenced to 7 years, Phillips' conviction was overturned within 6 months. Hancock's trial resulted in a hung jury. Another suspect was a Malaysian cook named Maurice, working at the Pearl House Hotel in Austin. Maurice told acquaintances that he planned to travel by ship to London and left town in January 1886, several weeks after the servant girl murders ended. A 2014 episode of History Detective accuses a young African-American man working in downtown Austin, Nathan Elgin, a cook and only 19 years old at the time of the Annihilator killings, was shot by police when he dragged a girl out of the saloon where he was drinking in February 1886. He died from his wounds right around the time the murders, coincidentally or not, stopped. It's possible that the Annihilator moved on after the Capitol building was finished in 1888, taking his bloodthirsty impulses with him. Hey everyone! I just wanted to express how grateful I am that you took the time to listen to my narration. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I am Twysted Mind and please enjoy the rest of your day. Salamat!